This afternoon, I'm going to be talking about hidden gems in MySQL Shell. However, there is one of them that is no longer hidden because Fred just talked about it. Thanks, by the way. Not going to go through the obligatory love me slide except for one thing. I will point out the fact that before I became a developer, I was a paramedic for 15 years, which is a very rewarding career, especially when you consider the fact that I have delivered 3 babies. And one of them, their middle name is Scott because of me. Because I delivered the baby. I never given the other part. So, how many people here use MySQL Shell? Awesome. I am a huge fan of MySQL Shell. I used to live and die by Workbench. I typically shied away from CLI clients, mostly because I'm a poor typist, and I'm afraid that if I type the wrong command, I'll delete the internet. I've become really a big fan of MySQL Shell over the years. For people who aren't using it, it is a modern CLI that is useful for connecting to and managing MySQL instances. There are multiple different modes. There's JavaScript mode, where when you enter commands, you're using JavaScript syntax. Python mode, where you enter commands, you're using Python syntax. And then there's a SQL mode, which is akin to if you use the MySQL executable or MySQL executable on your machine, where you can just run straight up SQL queries. There's many useful features. I am not going to be able to cover all of them. We could probably do an entire conference just on the features of MySQL Shell, but I don't think anybody wants to sit through that. I do want to say that I'm not going to argue that some of these features are not hidden, but I will die on the hill that they're all gems. So you might see here, there might not be a single thing in here that you didn't know about, but all of the functionality I'm going to talk about, I think, is really cool. First thing is sandboxes. When I discovered that you could do sandboxes in MySQL Shell, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So what sandboxes are self-contained MySQL instances that run on your local machine. They are only accessible from your local machine. And in order to use it, you must have MySQL already installed on the system where you're running MySQL Shell. So this is where you actually type in the MySQL sh command. Not the instance or whatever that you may be connected to. It has to be running on the local machine or on the machine you're connected to. To deploy a sandbox, you do dba.deploy sandbox instance, and then you pass a port number. There is a configuration blocks that you can also pass to this. You can pass the password that you want to use and some other information. But by typing in this command, you're going to get a message saying, a new instance is going to be created and it's going to be stored in this particular directory. It gives you the warning about how you can't access them remotely and you shouldn't be using this for production. Because I didn't pass a password and I gave the command, you got to enter it. And then after a couple of minutes, you'll get a message saying that the instance has been successfully deployed. And to connect to it, you use shell.connect root at localhost :3336 or whatever port number.
Does this only work for one version of MySQL?
I'm sorry?
Does this only work for one version of MySQL? Can you have alternates if there's like DB deployer and things?
That I don't know.
You just change the path.
Okay, so the path you provide them with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So you see here it says shell.connect. Remember I said I was a poor typist? I don't like to type. I try to limit typing as much as I can, so I just use the shortcut for connection, which is /C, and we do root at localhost 3336, and you'll get the message. In this particular case, I had to provide the password because I hadn't yet saved it for MySQL Shell, and then it tells you it's up and running, and the server version is 9.1, and to use /use schema to set the schema you want to use. So one command now we now have at least one other instance of MySQL running on our local machine, which I think is pretty badass. There's other commands we can use. If you use dba.stop sandbox instance, that will stop a running instance. dba.start sandbox instance will start a stop instance in case you guys didn't figure that one out. dba.kill sandbox instance is useful if you're trying to test some type of HA solution that you are using sandboxes to configure on your machine. Kill will actually allow you to mimic a server going down. So it doesn't stop it gracefully, stop it gracefully. And then if you're done with the sandbox, you no longer want to use it, dba.delete sandbox instance. or you can go into the directory where they were when it's not running and delete the folder. The next little gem is server upgrade check. You have a question?
Yeah, just how much resources it takes the instance. It's small one.
If I remember correctly, it's not. So the question was how many resources it uses. It doesn't use as much as the full instance is actually running. So the next thing is server upgrade check. I think this is actually a neat feature too, is it allows you to check and see if the instance that you're connected to can be upgraded to X version. So if you're running 9.1 and you want to know if your database is compatible with 9.2, you can run server update check. By default, it will use the version of shell as the version that we're checking for. So if you're using version 9.2 of shell and you don't specify a target version when you run the upgrade check, it's going to check and see if the database you're checking it against is compatible with 9.2. But you can specify different versions. You don't have to, it's not only based on, it's just by default. So when you run util.check for you, or the command is util check for server upgrade. Again, if you want to pass in some options, you can. And I said one of them is target version. You'll get a message that says the server located at localhost 33060 because that's what I was connected to. Running 9.1 is now being checked for compatibility issues with 9.2. To check different target version, use the target version option. I love how verbose some of the messages are in MySQL shell because it makes it really easy to figure out when you've done something wrong, which I tend to do a lot. First thing, it checks to see if there's any changes or deprecations in the variable checks. No issues found in this instance. Awesome. The next thing it does is it checks for issues reported by check table X for upgrade command. And this has to be old because I haven't played with the MySQL REST stuff in like a year and a half. So I probably need to clean out some of the stuff in my local instance. So this is just to give me a warning saying, hey, UTF-8 MB3 is deprecated and it'll be changed at some point in the future to UTF-8 MB4. And then it does a syntax check for routine-like objects. And here we're saying that this is going to be a problem. And again, this is, I think, related to when I was playing around with InnoDB clusters, that there's some syntax errors that exist that are not compatible with 9.2. And it tells you how to get more information. It checks for foreign keys that have issues. In this particular case, there's 3 issues where the foreign keys are pointing to something that is not a complete unique index. And then it gives you possible solutions on what to do for that particular problem, which I think is really cool. Checks for deprecated or invalid user authentication methods. And it checks for spatial indexes, and then you get a summary at the end. So we have the 4 errors, which were the errors with the MySQL REST service. We had the 3 warnings, which were the foreign key issues, and then we had the 1 notice, which was the deprecation of UTF-8 MB3. We can do advanced data dumping with MySQL shell. And this is the feature I use a lot because I transfer stuff between databases a lot, and it's very easy to do. So with the advanced data dump, we can dump specific tables, specific schemas, or the entire instance that exists on your server. Now, when you do dump instance, it will not dump the system tables. So MySQL table, systable, performance schema, those will not get dumped. The dumps are multi-threaded. If you don't specify the number of threads, it defaults to 4. Now, keep in mind, just because you keep adding more threads does not mean the process is going to get better. Eventually, if you add more threads, the process is actually going to get worse. You have to kind of play around with it, especially if you have a lot of data. You can filter the dumps. We can dump the data to a cloud provider. So I can actually run a command on my laptop for the databases that are on my laptop and dump the data to OCI or to AWS or to Azure or any actual S3 compatible storage bucket on a cloud. And you can also verify if your database is compatible with HeatWave MySQL. So if you have a database that's on-prem and you're thinking of moving it to HeatWave MySQL, you can actually run this You can actually do this with the option of dry run set to true. So it won't actually dump anything, but it will tell you the issues that you might have with going to HeatWave MySQL. Did you have a question?
Yeah, we'd like to know for the dump, is it like my dumper stuff, which split the table by primary key and chunk the tables, or is it like per table threads?
I don't know what the difference is between what we do in MySQL dumper.
It doesn't.
It's the per chunk of table.
Yeah, he chunks it.
Yes. So here we have util.dump instance, and we're passing in two arguments. The first one is the path. So here we're saying we want it to go into the dump/example1 directory off of my user root, and we're specifying we want to use 8 threads. Remember, the default is 4, so we're doubling the threads with this command. Util.dump schemas. When you're passing in the schemas, you want to pass in an array of schema names that you want to do. Yes, I know there's a typo on the screen. There's no closing bracket on there. I realized that about 20 minutes ago, and I apologize. And then we pass the path where, again, the path where we want to save it. Here we're doing to example 2. And then threads, we're going to be using 8 threads. And then we have dump tables. We have 3 arguments here. We're passing in that the schema is MySQL shorts. The table is it's an array, so we're only passing in one is games, and then we're dumping that to the example 3 folder. If you only want a subset of the data from a particular table, you can actually add a where property to the options config. And here we're saying we want to dump tables. We're using the MySQL shorts schema, the games table. We're dumping it to example 4, and in the where clause, we're saying where MySQL shorts.games, which you have to do the full path to the table there, where the score column is greater than 90. So in this particular table, if there were scores that were less than 90, when we dumped it, those wouldn't be included in the dump. Here is an example of how you do it. You dump the entire instance to a storage bucket. Now, this is kind of cheating, and I made it look easy on purpose because I am running the OCI CLI on my computer, and I have it configured so that I don't have to provide certain variables when I do that, such as namespace. If you were going to try this without having the OCI CLI client installed, you'd have to include the namespace. So it would be another property namespace and then whatever it is. By default, it will try to use OCI. So unless you specify another cloud provider or the path to the cloud provider, it will try to do this particular call from OCI. And then this is the OCI MDS is the property that you want to pass in the options config to check compatibility with HeatWave MySQL. So again, if you're going from on-prem to HeatWave and you want to make sure your database is good, that's what you need. That's the option you need to run to make sure, and it will spit out a list of stuff that you might need to either you need to change or it's suggested to change. When you dump your data, this is what it looks like. It's a combination of binary files, SQL files, and JSON files. And these are actually what will be used in the next hidden gem, which is advanced data load. So here, what we're talking about is any data that we dump using dump tables, dump schema, or dump instance can be loaded into a database by using load dump. And maybe it's the immature American in me, but dump, I always laugh when I'm using these commands. Especially load dump. I'm like, who named that? Again, like all the dumping utilities, and see, now I'm going to start laughing. It can be multi-threaded. When you do the load of the data, you can actually improve performance of the load by telling MySQL to skip the bin log. So when you're loading the data, you're not writing to the bin log. We can load data from the cloud. As a matter of fact, I have an example that I did before where I had a MySQL database in Azure, and I dumped the data to an Amazon S3 bucket, and then loaded the data from an S3 bucket into a MySQL or a HeatWave MySQL instance in OCI. And that's 2 commands. 3 cloud providers, 2 commands, moved all the data. And then you can also, for when you're doing the load, if the tables don't have invisible keys, you can actually specify to create them when the data gets loaded. Before you load the data, on the target system, you have to make sure local infile is set to on. If you don't, you'll get a message that says, hey, local infile needs to be set to on, go do it. And then on the source instance, we do util.load_dump, and regardless of whether or not you did dump instance, dump tables, dump schemas, the command to load them is load dump. And here we do dumps for example 2, and we specify we want 8 threads. So that's going to use 8 threads to restore or to load the data that's in that particular folder. Here we have a load dump where if you want to skip the bin log, the option is skip bin log equals true. This is the OS bucket. Again, purposely made this look easier than it actually is. You can call me mean if you want, but you specify. Here the difference is you see the example 2. That's not a path on my local machine. That's actually a path inside of the bucket that I'm using to get the data. So it's going to go to the database dumps bucket in the folder named example 2. That's where it's going to pull the data from. And then the create invisible PKs, that's the option for that. Something to keep in mind, if you start doing a load of data and there's a problem or there's some interruption and you go to try and load the data again, it's going to pick up where it left off. Maybe not exactly where it left off, but it can remember what happened. Because if you do a full load and then you try to do a full load again, it's going to say, hey, there's nothing to do. But there is an option you can tell it to say, hey, start over. This is the one Fred ruined. Copying data between instances. This is actually a really nice feature where you kind of leave off the step. Or I should say we're basically combining 2 steps into one command, where we can move data directly from one instance to another. Again, this works cross cloud providers. So you can actually copy data directly from an AWS instance or an instance in AWS to an instance in OCI directly. As long as you have a connection as long as the machine you're on has a connection to both, you'll be able to hit both. And again, we can copy specific tables, specific schemas for the entire instance. And when we're doing copying the data between, we can also filter the data that's going to the new instance. As before, on the target system, you need to make sure that local infile is set to on. Again, if you don't, it'll tell you. We do util.copy tables, and we're saying we want to copy the MySQL shorts schema, the games table, and then we're passing it to the instance that's root at localhost port 3336. So this was the sandbox that we created in the first step, in the first gem. And all that's going to do is just going to copy the games table from my local instance or the instance I'm connected to that particular instance.
Sorry, is that copy also multi-threaded?
I'm sorry?
Is that copy also?
Yes, it is also multi-threaded, and again, the default is 4. But you can go up. I don't know why you want to go down, but you can go up from there. Yes?
Is the invisible column for tracking the chunk load from both sides? When you don't have key in the data source, the primary key in the data source, then you use that invisible column.
So if you're saying if there's no primary key in the source, can you add one in the target?
Yeah, I didn't understand the invisible PK feature from your slides.
If you have a table that doesn't have a primary key, when you load the data, you could actually have MySQL create an invisible primary key for you.
So that's the feature.
Yes.
Okay.
And then copy instance, all you need to do is where you want the instance to go. Yes.
Could it be possible, you think, to copy that into sandbox from like?
Yes. Yep. As long as you have a connection to both machines, it doesn't matter. You can do that. Basically, what happens is the data doesn't go from instance A to instance B. It goes from instance A to your machine to instance B. So your machine is kind of like the go-between. As long as you can make a connection to both machines at the same time, you can dump them to a sandbox.
So what is the source and target?
In this particular case, the source is the instance of MySQL I have running on my laptop that I use for everyday stuff. And the target is going to be the sandbox instance that I just created.
It's actually the global sessions established on the machine you're running right now.
Yes. Whatever machine you're connected to, when you run load, that's going to be the source of the data. So the instance you're connected to is the source, and then you provide the target.
Oh, okay.
So the current session is the source.
So if I was actually SSH into a machine that had access to my production database, and I ran this command, it would take my production database and dump it into the sandbox.
So if you are first connected to AWS, for example, we connect, and then that connection is used to copy the instance and put it in OCI.
Yep. Yes. So the question was, if you're connected, does it use that instance to copy the data and then send it to OCI or wherever? And yes, it does. Yes.
So you mentioned you can copy your production data to development. That's really good for the talk yesterday about like developers only don't know about databases. So that's throw security out, right?
Well, not every database needs to have data sanitized to go from production to development. I would agree most of them do.
You don't work at a real company, you know.
Would that stream it then, or would it make another copy?
I don't know how the underpinnings of that work. Does it stream the data when it's copying?
Yeah, so if you're on the box where you actually wanted to copy it from, would it stream it directly to the destination, or would it create a copy locally?
Creates a copy locally.
And then pushes it up and then deletes the copy?
Exactly.
Gotcha. So the question was, does this stream the data from the source to the target? Or does it pull it down locally and then push it out? And the answer is it pulls it locally, pushes it out, and then deletes the local files. So it's kind of like doing a dump and then a load, but doing it all in one command.
Right.
Yes.
So the data on its own is not actually very useful because you actually talk privileges and everything else. How do you handle privileges, especially if you're going between different versions?
It's a good question. And it's a question I do not know the answer to, but I will get an answer.
That's going to be well, later, okay. But I mean, I believe it does handle privileges, but there can be differences in privileges from major versions. So you get extra privileges
Correct.
going in one direction or the other. I don't know how it is.
It's possible, and I'll have to test this. It's possible that when you try to do that, if the permissions are different, you'll actually get an error message or a message saying, we can't do this because of this reason.
There is so in shell there are options. For example, let's say you want to move OCI. This is what I know for it. And there are some grants you don't have access and stuff. You can say restricted grants or strip grants.
So
And then
filtering or something.
it will fix it
Yes.
for you.
Okay.
And also, if you have stored functions or stored procedures, you can also strip out the definer when you do the load or the dump. Yes, sir.
Regarding consistency of the data, is there some options to, for example, just load one table and make it stream to a replica or something like this?
You can actually send the data to any target that you have access to.
But does it get, for example, the PTID of a replication, or is there any way to specify
That I do not know.
Yes, you can include utility information.
It has everything, but for one table, I don't know, or if you just dump one single table, I'm not sure. But usually it has all the payload position, GTA. It has.
Here's an example of how you use the where to filter the data that's going to be copied. Again, it's the same table, same command as before, and the same filter. Working on it, Fred.
You get partitions too.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Creating a replica set. I think this is really cool because using MySQL shell, you can create a replica set using 2 commands. And you can test your setup using sandboxes. So you can spin up multiple sandboxes and then use the commands against those sandboxes to create your replica set to make sure you have the commands down correctly before you actually push it out into production. And you can test that, or you can test some of that by killing the sandbox instances to make sure the stuff is still working the way you expect. So the first command we do is we do var rs equals dba.create replica set demo set. Yes, you can actually set variables in JavaScript and Python mode in MySQL shell. So when we're done calling dba create replica set, rs actually becomes the value of RS is the actual replica set information. So when we run that, we see a new replica set with instance, blah, 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 will be created. It checks the instance, make sure everything's okay. And then it says, hey, we're good to go. You can check the status if you want. We're not going to do that right now. And then the next thing is RS. Remember, RS is the actual instance of the replica set that we just created because we set it as a variable. Dot add instance, and then we pass in root at localhost, pass in the port number, which again, like I said, these were two sandboxes. And it'll tell you that it's adding the instance to the replica set, performs validation checks. It does a bunch of different checks. It'll ask you what type of recovery method you want to use. In this particular example, I use clone. And then you'll get all these messages saying, hey, it's going to copy all this data. This actually happened very fast because I cloned an empty database. Sometimes, depending on the data, it's going to take a little bit longer. And then when we're done, you can do rs.status, and you'll get a JSON blob coming back that lays out what the information is. And the important things here is you can see that the primary instance is 127.0.0.555, and then the secondary is 5556. When you do create replica set, it needs to be on the machine, or you need to be connected to the machine, connected to the instance that you want to be the primary. Running system commands. This is actually something that comes in helpful for me because a lot of times I need to run some other command while I'm in shell, and I don't have to leave shell. I can just continue to do it. The results are displayed in shell. You can do \system ls minus la, and it shows the path there, and that's what actually will show up in shell. If you want to do sudo, and also here's the shortcut, which I use, again, because I don't like to type a lot, it's \! Is how you run system commands, and you do sudo ls / or a slash, it'll ask you for a password, and then it'll show you the contents of that particular folder. The help system. The help system in MySQL shell is amazing. There is so much information in there. It has information about every internal object, every internal method, every SQL call that you have a question about, MySQL functions. You can get all that help information from shell. As a matter of fact, if you do \help, you get help about the help. It actually tells you, it lays out for you what information you have available, how you can format the data, how you can format your command requests. It tells you what the main categories are that you can help for. It tells you some of the available topics that you can get help for. It gives you information about the shell commands, and notice the 3 dots on the bottom. I cut that off because it was too big, because there's too much information there. You can get help about the global objects. Again, note the 3 dots, too much information to include on one slide. And then the last thing it does is it gives you examples of what you could try. Just so you know for doing, so you see it's like we're asking for help with SQL syntax, we're asking for help with check instance configuration, with the connect command, the admin API. There is a ton of stuff in there. And to show you exactly how much stuff is in there, I asked for help on the command dump schemas. And the top of the help that you get looks like this. It gives you the name, the syntax, information about some of the other stuff in terms of options and output URL. And then it does that. Okay? That is basically, when you do a dump of something like dump schemas, or you do a help of something like dump schemas, it will give you information about every potential option that you have, as well as every argument that you need to pass to that particular function. It really is astounding how much information is available in help. I've actually stopped Googling for help in shell, because that's what I used to do before I realized how robust it was, and I actually just started doing the help here. And it does get hard to try and track that, and it'd be a good idea for me to be able to do summarize in ChatGPT, but I did that on purpose because that's one of the longest ones I've seen. So there's other functionality that exists as well that didn't really make the list as being a hidden gem. You can learn external scripts. So if you have a directory or you have a file that's a .SQL file that has SQL code in it, you can actually use MySQL shell to load that into the database. You can create and manage clusters. You can export table data in different formats such as CSV, TSV, JSON. You can check the status of the connection to your MySQL instance. There's actually CLI integration for scripting. I actually have a process that I use that for a personal project of mine. It actually takes the data from production, pulls it down into my local machine, and restores it onto the database on my local machine. You can retrieve MySQL instance diagnostic information. There's a whole bunch of customizations you can do. You can customize the prompt. There are plugins that allow us to, it supports plugins so you can add functionality. There is the concept of startup scripts. So there are scripts that can be run every time MySQL starts. So you can add more customizations on top of just doing plugins. And there's a lot more. I can't even say I scratched the surface of what Shell can do. This is just the stuff that I thought was the coolest or the most useful. So again, how to reach me, here's my email, Blue Sky, Stroz.dev, Mastodon at Stroz, LinkedIn at Scott-Stroz. And then any questions? Yes, sir.
Is there some ACL system on top of each command you can do?
I'm sorry?
Is there some ACL or grant per command of the API? Or?
I don't believe so.
What do you mean?
Like, for example, if you want to do, I don't know, one option like switch over, I know you can do it with the MySQL shell. Then to have like some sort of creating users and groups that are able to do that.
Well, for managing clusters, for example, you can create an admin account,
Yeah.
especially with a specific set of grants just for that.
Yeah.
And you use that one. I don't know if that's your question.
Yeah, that's all the action you can do in the shell that are not like.
But the thing is, when you connect to Shell, you would connect to a user that has those permissions.
Yeah.
That has those grants.
So the permissions are listed with all the type of action that can.
No, the permission is the permission that are on the MySQL server. So so the shell does something, but at the end it will call something on MySQL, right? So you can run whatever you want in the shell. If you don't have the permission to run it on the server, it will fail.
Yeah, but
It's a client, so you don't check. It's hard to say, okay, I'm a client, but it's you have your terminal. You say, oh, if I want to do ls, you do ls it depends where you want to do ls. If you want to do ls in /root, it won't work. But ls in your own directory, it works. Then it's when you access the resource you are not allowed to do it that you have an issue in a terminal. And here it's the same with the shell. If you want to see tables that you don't have access, or you want to dump a table that you don't have access, you will be able to run the dump and then say, oh, you don't have access to that table, you don't have dump. But there is no, you are not allowed to run dump. We don't check that out at the client level. It's a client level, so we're gonna, it's not that the shell is in the cloud or something like that.
Because then you'd be managing two different sets of permissions. Who can access the stuff on the server and who can run the commands on the client.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes, sir.
Did you do any performance comparison to extra backup? Dumper store speed? My dumper.
Say that again.
Did you any performance comparison to Percona extra backup? My dumper.
I have not, and I haven't seen any.
Well, we did.
Friendly.
We did. We did not extra backup because it's different. We need to compare, but with my dumper we did, and we published them. Kenny did and published in the blog, and it was very nice. I don't know if David is still here. So it was very nice because you could see that it was like, oh, my dumper was very nice. We improved stuff. Then they saw, they improve it. Let's improve it again, and that created something very nice for the users, I guess, because now they are competing. I think we are very close, both so when we published it, we were much faster at that time. Then they fixed stuff, then they were, and we still, and so, but it's almost the same speed now.
Sorry, quick question. Is there a way to throttle the copy and the impact on the server, the source, or the target server, source server? Because with MySQL, with my number, you can do that. And that's one important thing if you want to copy something from production database.
I think there is a way. I need to check that. I think there is. For the replica set and all that kind with Claude, I'm sure it works. There is and for the copy instance, I think so.
Oh, okay.
I think there is. I need to check what's the comment, but I'm almost sure we have.
All right. Oh, we got one more.
Okay, why not to do physical backup?
You can do physical backup if you want. There is for MySQL, you have MySQL Enterprise Backup. For if you want to use extra backup, you can do extra backup. Or clone, it's a physical backup clone. You can clone data physically with it. So it depends for what. You cannot do physical backup from Aurora to OCI, E2A, for example. It won't work.
But ask the people in the AWS.
That's right.
That's possible to do inside MySQL if you inside MySQL.
Yeah, but inside MySQL, just clone can do it, nothing else. Other physical backups, you need to have access to the file. Without having access to the file, it's complicated to do a physical backup or even a snapshot. If you don't have access to that.
MySQL.
Yeah, MySQL, we can do it, it's clone. The thing is that clone from MySQL and the clone in RDS, for example, I don't even know if they have it, it's different. It's not MySQL. That's the thing.
When are you adding LLM to the documentation page?
So the documentation page?
Yes, for example, in MySQL manual, there are thousands of pages, and it was even ridiculous to see the storing here. LLM would help, right?
Yeah,
Live with your.
if you wait the last talk, I will show you.
Just how long the terrorist make answer?
See, he won't ruin stuff in his talk, but it'll ruin it in mine.